Well, that's about as perfect a day as you could plan. It was also the first hurdle of 7 in the next 3 weeks, and Villa really needed to clear it comfortably to set the tone. And as much as this show will focus on the performance at Preston North End, the draw on Sunday certainly requires some attention as well. Presented by 24/7 Services, let's review the FA Cup quarter-final. And Preston North End 0, Aston Villa 3. Welcome inside the parlor, where I just had a visitor. Do you know it was a year ago to the day that Sandra and I were in Birmingham for our second trip over to see the mighty Villa? And with us at that Wolves game were our dear friends Dale and Alison West, and it was their first Villa Park experience, so needless to say, it was life-changing. Now, this was Dale's first visit to the parlor. Not quite as life-changing, but always great to catch up with a fellow Villa fan who I've known since the 90s. We started our radio careers together, and when Dale said, "My team is Aston Villa," we were instantly friends. When I think about what ingredients make for the perfect day, well, they would include a football match between, I don't know, say 2 founding members of the Football League at a cool and traditional and very loud stadium. Throw in some sunshine and the desired result, and everybody goes home happy. The Holy Trinity show's senior correspondent Samir Gaby made the trip to Lancashire via Leeds as he snipered somebody's homemade tinfoil FA Cup. What would a FA Cup match be without somebody's homemade tinfoil FA Cup? If you didn't actually watch this game and you just saw these key numbers and, of course, the scoreline, you'd have thought that Aston Villa just breezed through this game, but it absolutely was not the case. And we shouldn't be surprised by that, as Preston North End have been undefeated in their last 15 home games, and they hadn't conceded more than 1 goal during that spell. This was a pretty high XG. I don't think it was the highest of the season, but this is what you want to see. 8 attempts on target, with 7 of them actually being on target. And Villa created 8 big chances and unfortunately missed 6 of them. And I think 2 of those fell to Ollie Watkins, 1 to Jacob Ramsey. My special stat also reflected the territorial advantage in this game. 9 corners to Villa, none for the home side. I know a lot of people are frustrated with the fact that we didn't do more with those 9 corners and multiple free kicks in dangerous scoring territory, but I believe in the law of averages. If we missed that many opportunities in a game like this, then we are bound to conjure one up in an upcoming game which could have more significance. Still, I'd love to sit in on one of those debrief type situations with Austin McPhee and the technical staff to see what it is exactly they talk about. Why I'm excited about Aston Villa right now is because our games at the moment are kind of following a very similar pattern to the run-in of spring 2023, which I bring up a lot. Think about it. Very tight games at the start, not a lot of chances, often level at half-time, and then Villa very professionally, methodically, and patiently wait until the opportunities arise to score. And it's not a very strenuous game that we play either, because the ball does not get tired as we move it around the press, whereas our opponents are actually wilting later in games as they try to press us and force us into mistakes. Where the game changed right around the hour mark is a perfect example, and this is where the very boisterous and invested crowd at Deepdale might have actually worked against Preston North End, because the home side came out the better side. I don't think anybody can argue with that, which was odd, because you would have thought after not testing their goalkeeper, Unai Emery would have tried to have snapped everybody back to attention at halftime, kind of like he did at Brentford and at home to Club Brugge. Instead, Preston North End had way more of the ball, and they were making it very difficult for us to get out of our own defensive third. And when that was happening, what was the crowd doing? Surging. And sometimes footballers who are all adrenaline junkies do things that they probably shouldn't do when the adrenaline starts to surge. Now, remember, this was a depleted Preston North End team with lots of injuries and absentees due to ineligibility or for other reasons. And I'm a little bit surprised they didn't just sit off a bit more at times in a mid-block maybe because, Villa was waiting for them to press. And once you get past the first wave, the entire field opens up. And that's exactly what happened in and around the hour mark. Maybe the best thing about the nature of how this game played out was that we were able to introduce fresh legs and get some minutes under the belts of players who hadn't gone for quite some time. 5 players introduced with one eye on Wednesday in the game at the Amex. I mean, the only players not available in the squad were the injured Ross Barkley, Axel Dessassi, who was cup-tied, and Leon Bailey, who had a very demanding travel itinerary with Jamaica. The Reggae Boys did not look good under Steve McLaren in this Gold Cup qualifier, especially the first leg where Bailey had to score a late stoppage time penalty to salvage a 1-1 draw with St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Seeing Amadou Onana, though, fresh and available and looking good, very good news. The 24/7 services team is available even on a cold and windy Tuesday night in Stoke, where they were recently with a regular client, John Siskin's son, at the Stoke Telecoms Engineering Control Building, where water was getting in behind the walls. And so here's where some great tradesmanship occurs and solutions to problems. They identified the problem, the vents on the exterior of the building. So they built these custom drip edges that they installed above all the vents. And you can see there's quite a few of them on the side of the building. But just look at how neat and tidy this is. And more importantly, effective, as the water ingress issue was solved. So this is what you'd call a bespoke solution for an industrial type project. And during the Brighton review, I'll show you some of the great residential work that the company is undertaking right now as the Villa Mad crew is all over the UK doing various projects at a whole bunch of job sites. And I put the 24/7 services phone numbers in the description of these videos for your project or an emergency, but you can also get to them from their website using the Contact Us form. Whose idea was the balloons? Should be banned. Paul Hansager, 24/7 Services, was at Deepdale. He reminded me last year that Villa in the 90s used to release balloons before games, but we put helium in them so they would float away and not roll around on the field looking like footballs. It's a minor nitpicky issue, but for the second time in consecutive games, Morgan Rogers was not as influential as we've seen him in the past. And I think it's partially because of the position he played, which was wide right in what looked to me like a 4-2-3-1, morphing into a 4-4-2 out of possession. We just didn't see him break away from guys and pull away with the ball. Maybe a couple of times in the game, despite the fact that he earned the penalty. And I think that's just attributed to him trying to work out his relationship with Matt Cash and Marco Asensio, and that's going to take time. But let's hope that he does get those relationships sorted out, because it was a very positive week for him with England. Emi Martinez marks his 200th appearance with Aston Villa. That's incredible. With a bagel, as we like to say in Canada. Just last week, he and his country go into arch rivals Uruguay, win the game, and then they come home and hand an even bigger arch rival in Brazil a bare bottom spanking, where he's doing keep-me-ups at the end just to rub salt in the wounds. And this, of course, was after Rafinha probably just talked too much. Are we about to see a significant run of form from our debut? Big issue number 3, Ramsey revival. Some similarities between these last few weeks and the spring run-in of 2023. First of all, the Mings-Konsa partnership looks impenetrable at the moment, and Jacob Ramsey has rediscovered some real sharpness. I mean, he looked fierce on the ball, 2 for 2 on successful dribbles, and 87% pass completion percentage. But off the ball, he was 8 for 10 on ground duels, recovered the ball 5 times, and he drew 5 fouls. There's just an efficiency and sharpness to his movement. And apart from scoring the goal, he also plays the split pass that opens up Digne for the 1-0 goal. He also played the very clever back pass to Morgan Rogers, which ultimately led to the penalty. Now, whether he meant to find Rogers with it, only he will know. But in a game where the opponent is dropping and allowing very little space in their defensive third, sometimes creativity comes in handy. And then he'll be a little bit disappointed that he missed a chance just before then. This was considered a big chance missed, because otherwise it might have been 2-0 even a few moments earlier. On his goal, Ramsey demonstrates beautifully the precise type of movements that Unai Emery covets in his middle-of-the-park play, and that's the ability to take, turn, and drive past people in that neutral third. First, he gets into a good pocket of space, which is a good detail, and you do that by scanning constantly, but then he shapes up to receive the ball on his back foot, his left foot, before turning away and driving forward. He drove past a bunch of people in this game, and we've seen that over the last few weeks. At the end of this run, okay, he gets a little bit lucky because it looks like the ball goes straight through the goalkeeper's hands, but you know what? He takes the responsibility, and that's a fantastic sign. And at 3-0, the game is dusted. If I was choosing the man of the match, Jacob Ramsey would absolutely be in the discussion along with Boubacar Kamara and Marcus Rashford, obviously the latter getting the headlines and accolades because of the goals. But, you know, tactically speaking, to have a Rashford and a Ramsey as options, slightly different ones, on the left side of the attack is going to be very useful for us. And as I said in the past show, I think JJ is absolutely benefiting from having Marcus Rashford around. Big issue number 2, Digne delivers. It didn't start the tidiest for Digne, who almost gifted Preston an early present in the form of a stray back pass, and thankfully referee Chris Kavanagh didn't cock this one all up by awarding a crowd-pleasing early penalty, because it was never a penalty. But Digne grew into the game and then contributed 2 huge assists, and really he should have had 3, but the most important of those was on the first goal. We've now seen this goal numerous times already in 2025, the square ball cut back from halfway down the 18-yard box. And I know it wasn't a great day for Digne, free kick wise, crosses wise, but when the moment came to deliver, he does. And when you see it from this angle, there's not a gigantic window to play this ball into, and he does. He's precise. And this is what the class players bring. Game-changing moments. But then Digne also plays the through ball to Jacob Ramsey that sends him away for the third goal. And while we may look at this and think, well, this is a simple pass, anybody can make this pass, I could make that pass, you have to look at the detail a little bit more carefully. There's only one place this ball could have gone in order for Ramsey to take it and then roll his opponent and drive away with it, and that's to play it across Ramsey's body and to his back foot, his preferred left foot, which he does to the inch. And it should have been 3 assists in minute number 81 when Digne plays a peach of a ball to Ollie Watkins, who had literally just stepped onto the pitch. And I know Watkins will be annoyed with himself for not scoring with his very first touch of the game, as he just couldn't sort the contact out. And for people wondering, well, how does Ian Maatsen not start in this team? Well, Digne is offering something different. He's offering craft over pace, and it's a wonderful luxury, again, to have 2 players to choose from in that position. And the number 1 issue that defined Preston 0, Villa 3, ruthless Rashford. I saw a lot of people predict that Marcus Rashford would finally open his account for Aston Villa in this game. I hope that those folks put a little flutter on that prediction, like my coaching colleague here in town, Jeff Hodgson, who's a big Man City fan. He put down $30 on about 10 prop bets in this Preston Villa game, and he got all of them right for a $1,300 payday. I don't know if the number 9 role is Rashford's favorite or his best role for that matter, but isn't it nice that he can play it? And he had the freedom of roaming all the way across the 18-yard box with Marco Asensio playing behind him. And that gave us the ability to rest Ollie Watkins, who you know is going to start on Wednesday because he has absolutely feasted on Brighton and Hove Albion over the last few seasons. And then Unai Emery has another wonderful choice to make. Does he play Rashford or Jacob Ramsey on the left-hand side? And that will probably depend entirely on what he tactically sees as a weakness or strength in the opponent. You know Rashford was desperate to finally score, reward Villa for their faith in him after coming off a very positive week with England. And maybe he was a bit selfish in and around the 53rd minute when he weaved almost somehow all the way through to try to score himself, when really the smarter play would have been to just move the ball to his right, where, surprise, surprise, a wide open Marco Asensio was standing waiting to tap it in. But the drought would end for Marcus Rashford around the hour mark. And as I've said a million times on this show, it's not the player with the ball, but the one without it that makes the play. And Rashford's arrival in the box was the cue for Digne to play it square. And after that, this is the touch of a man who has scored countless goals in his career. Before the ball even arrived, he knew exactly where the goalkeeper was to simply guide it into the open side of the net. Then on the penalty again, the class of a prolific penalty taker with maybe one or two exceptions. But there was no question who was going to take it among the Villa players, even though Asensio was the one who took the one at Brugge. No, the ball went directly to Marcus Rashford, and then it's just a matter of him outlasting Di Cornell, which takes a lot of nerve because I watched this a bunch of times, and I don't think Marcus Rashford ever looks at the ball on his run-up. He's watching the goalkeeper the entire time and just slots it home. When Marcus Rashford is on the park, we have our A1 penalty taker. Let's just formalize the Sill Hill Brewery star performer as Marcus Rashford, who finally delivered the goods. And in my opinion, this will only make him thirsty for more. Busy day at the tap room in Aston on Sunday because the game was being screened there, and the Sill Hill Brewery was pouring complimentary pints for every goal that Villa scored. And it kind of worked out that those goals came a little later in the match. And among the crowd there, loyal Holy Trinity show viewer Leon, the local bin man, who brought Patricia, Ann, and Larson, who wasn't having any pints, but kids are allowed to be there till 8 p.m. What a perfect Mother's Day plan. Award-winning, handcrafted, Birmingham brewed beer for Mother's Day. And you know it's going to be busy before the Forest game on Saturday and definitely before the PSG home game in a couple of weeks. So get there early. And after all that, a glorious sunny day in Lancashire with a perfect result, Joe Hart reaches into the ball bag and pulls out the winner of Manchester City Bournemouth to pair up with Forest in one semi-final, leaving Aston Villa to face Crystal Palace in the other. And I know a lot of Villa fans gulped and gasped at that draw because they've had our number of late. We haven't beaten Oliver Glasner since he took over the Eagles. But I would like to once again bring up the law of averages in previewing this Wembley semi-final. The idea that Aston Villa would remain winless for a fifth straight time against Crystal Palace, given the depth and quality of our squad, if it still is deep and full of quality by the time the end of April rolls around, because we will have played more games than Palace. Plus all the Wembley experience we have in our team now with Rashford, some of our other England regulars, even Tyrone Mings and John McGinn for their promotion playoff experience all those years ago. I just feel like Aston Villa is due. And you know, here's also where that ghastly performance at Selhurst Park recently and even the 5-0 last year may serve as a very important lesson for Unai Emery and his staff and, of course, the players. If we have our best 11 available and our full squad, we have a better starting team and squad than Crystal Palace. And if we've learned anything from that 4-1 loss at Selhurst Park recently, it's that we have to stick to our principles and our structure and our way, the way that our players are most familiar with, and not tinker or try to adapt or adjust to what Crystal Palace is doing, despite the fact that they've had our number over the last games. And we have lots of players in our team that they should be worried about. And Crystal Palace is such a weird team. I mean, they were non-existent at Craven Cottage on Saturday until about the 34th minute, when Eze, out of nowhere and against the run of play, comes up with a wonder strike. Palace was a team that was in relegation danger to start the season. They were awful going through fall, and now they are on some kind of run, especially away from home. And it's important to note, they are the designated home team for this semi-final, and even though it's at Wembley and in London, they may feel like they are the home team, but Villa does have a pretty significant fan base, and they will show up in numbers. And you know what? Would you rather be going into this game coming off a 4-1 win or a 4-1 loss? I just cannot see Villa losing a game 4-1 like this at Wembley, because this is not a league game. This is not an early round Carabao Cup game. The stakes are way, way higher, and Aston Villa will be, like their motto says, prepared. The same can be said for our visit to the South Coast on Wednesday, and a match with Brighton and Hove Albion, a very tricky but intriguing contest, given that Brighton might be gutted and potentially shattered after their marathon quarterfinal with Nottingham Forest, which they lost ultimately on penalties. They also lost a couple of players to injuries, Adam Webster and Jorginho Ruter. Let's see if they're back in time for Wednesday. But this is a fixture we've had a lot of joy in of late, up until last year, when we were totally shattered, running on fumes, and they were the beneficiaries of a rather dodgy late penalty. The thing about our league run-in is that we're playing so many teams in and around us in the table, including the Seagulls Wednesday and Forest on Saturday. Those are 6-point games. You win a couple or three of those games in succession, all of a sudden you're climbing up the table, and more importantly, you are gaining momentum, which is a huge thing in sport. And I'm not saying we're entitled to win the game on Wednesday. We're going to stroll into the Amex and bomb off the home side. I'm not saying that. But I sure do like the trending that I've been seeing of late. And we have a big and fresh squad, and the confidence seems to be high again. Let this sink in now. Aston Villa is 2 Wembley wins away from winning its first FA Cup in 68 years. And I never mentioned how important that clean sheet was, because establishing that clean sheet mentality is going to be really important over the next 2 months. Goals may win you games. Clean sheets win you trophies. Until Brighton, savor this most recent success, and of course, and as always, up the mighty Villa!